How's it going, guys? I've heard that a lot of people are talking about this new game, Chrono Odyssey, and I decided to share with you a couple of tips that are not just about this game, but generally about any future MMO on how you can spot potentially a good game or bad game. Of course, I can't really say much about Chrono Odyssey yet because it didn't come out officially. Right now it's a bit too early, but I just want to help you so you don't get too hyped about something that may turn out to be just another cash grab of a sort. There's going to be a couple of generic signs for you to look for in almost any MMO game. First, one of the things, it's actually a small thing. It's not going to be enough, but it's something to look for. It's the publisher or the developer. Looking at this, you see that we're talking about Kakao Games, right? I haven't heard very good things about this company. One sign, of course, I don't want to sound like a grim guy or something, but once again, we're looking at a Korean video game publisher. That alone is already kind of a bad sign. Let's be real. Most of Korean MMO games are really just targeting Western audience and how to drain their wallets. But that's just my personal opinion. I'm pretty sure some people will hate on what I'm saying. Other people will pretty much love what I'm saying because that's usually how it goes. But we have to be real, guys. Korean MMO games are usually absurdly pay-to-win games. Pretty bad in this aspect. And it's not because of the business model. They can always choose a different business model. I feel like they just generally want to do this because they want others to suffer. But anyway, jokes aside, this is one sign. You can look at their track record. You can just check out any of the other games. I know for a fact that Elion has been completely cancelled. It was shut down right like a couple of months after it was released, which is kind of crazy. But before that, I've heard other content creators talking about how Kakao games are just pretty bad. But let's leave that aside. I'm just going to observe a couple of things. So first sign, you can immediately look at, check their website. You see, that's actually a very high quality website. I mean, it looks like that, right? Look at this. And not only that, but then we have some pictures, right? You can probably find a lot more footage somewhere else outside of their website. But just looking at the pictures here, those are like cinematic trailer pictures, but I would assume in-game, the graphics are going to be also pretty decent. Like realistically. We're looking at possibly very good graphics as well. This is actually not a good sign. And you can look at just, again, statistically, a lot of the modern MMO games, and not just MMO, but with MMOs, it's very clear. They have only one selling point, and that is high quality graphics. Now, what does that mean? That means that very likely they're trying to just hook you with the graphics because it is eye candy. And it looks very nice. It looks amazing. Definitely not many games can beat those graphics, especially in the MMO genre. However, this is pretty much their only selling point. The moment you start playing the game, yes, it will hook you with graphics. It will hook you most likely with some gameplay features and combat. But then the nightmare begins usually after that when you realize other aspects of the game, which I'm going to get into in a few seconds. But this is really not a good sign if the graphics are good. I know it sounds crazy, but this is one of the signs that suggests that they want to invest as much as possible into this, which is very superficial thing, like just on the surface, but very likely they haven't invested or they didn't want to invest into other far more important aspects of a game. And that includes the business model itself as well, but that's a whole different topic. So generally speaking, looking at the last couple of years, every single MMO is pretty much going crazy with graphics. And then very quickly after that, people realize it's just another garbage. Again, I don't want to say anything. I'm just using Chrono Odyssey as an example, just to point you into some of those things. I want to be wrong about this, and we'll see when it's released. But honestly, I'm confident that those things that I'm going to tell you are actually very true. So that's one thing to look for. Graphics already kind of a red flag for me. My alarm is already on, okay? So next thing, obviously, we cannot really check those things from just these pictures. We may be looking at some footage for like just showcases, but until the game is actually released, we cannot really check a lot of the things that I'm going to tell you about. So the next thing would be basically very core features of the game. The replayability. Are you able to consistently play the game without limitations? That would refer to any like energy systems that for some reason those things became somewhat popular and kind of a practice, not too much, but this should have stayed only for mobile games. However, we have a game like Throne and Liberty, for instance, that I've played up until recently, has those energy systems which I feel like most people really don't like them. They are limitation, and they're just trying to equalize everybody on like a same playing level, which to some people is good, but to others is obviously something negative, because some people may want to push through some specific type of content. You don't even need to be a hardcore player to do that, but maybe you want to get in today and play for 3 hours just one specific thing in the game. You cannot do that with some of those games because of those daily energy systems. Of course, a lot of games have daily quests and stuff like that, but they shouldn't go crazy on that, like adding it to every single aspect in the game, just like Throne of Liberty. So hopefully we don't have this with Chrono Odyssey, but that is already a bad sign. This will just repeat that same experience we had with Throne of Liberty. This is all connected to the grind and how much you need to grind. There has to be some sort of like a middle ground, some like a good kind of balance between that. Like it shouldn't be too grindy, but it also shouldn't be not grindy at all. Like it should have some middle ground and also not have limitations on that, like not have energy systems, so people feel like they are making meaningful progress. And if it is somewhat grindy, you should not have any limits on how much you can play. And also another part of the meaningful progress would be on how are you upgrading your character, how are you actually progressing. Like, is it going to be just another one of these games where you have to get the item and that's really nothing, because you're going to have to go through tons of layers of upgrading these items, which is really the most common practice with Korean games. You get an item, it's really not much, and then you have to upgrade it to plus 15 or something, then you have to add a bunch of things to it to actually make that an end game item. Like, I'm more of a classical type of player and I want to get into the game, play something, play part of the game, and when I get an item, to be actually excited about the item because I can just put it on right away, and that is already an upgrade for me. I really hate those upgrading things. They're really just opening their way to make pay-to-win elements or just extra grind. This is why they add them, because you're never gonna have limits on that. Like, you see, this is a very good opportunity for exactly cash grabbing games to say, this expansion you're gonna upgrade to plus 10. Well, if this is really easy for people, next expansion we're gonna make the items go all the way to plus 15, and this can go on and go on as long as they wanted to, because you really don't have any limitation on that. Like, there's no kind of rule on how much they can just push with this thing. It's just another layer of grinding and just opening to these possibilities. Where on the other hand, if the game does not have that from the beginning, then you're very likely not expecting them to ever add something like that to the game, because they'll just lose their current player base. So if you decide to start a game that has those kind of features, you gotta be ready that in the future they're just gonna ramp them up. They're just gonna make this treadmill bigger and bigger and bigger for the sake of grindiness and also for the pay-to-win element. Because personally, I have never seen a game that is pay-to-win and not have upgrade system, similar upgrade system for items. And also on the other hand, any game that doesn't have such upgrading systems are most likely never pay-to-win, interestingly enough. Which is exactly pretty much a segue to the next section. That's going to be pay-to-win scaling. And why I'm saying scaling, because when people talk about pay-to-win, it's a very vague definition, and a lot of people have different opinions about that, whether some game is pay-to-win or not. Now, let's be real. Most games are pay-to-win, especially free games. Now, that is already a red flag. If the game is free, that's already bad enough. It's going to be almost guaranteed that this game is going to be pay-to-win if it's also free to play. Very rare cases of games that are at the same time free and not pay to win, especially with MMOs. Now, the question is, however, how much is it pay to win? Because that's what I'm talking about, pay to win scaling. Like, do you just need to buy some inventory tabs or inventory bags? Those kind of like convenience stuff that, yes, they help you, that yes, they save you some time in the game. Maybe some gizmos like in Guild Wars 2. Actually, Guild Wars 2 is pay to win, which is crazy, even though a lot of people say not, but yes, it is pay to win because you have a lot of interesting gizmos that help you save a lot of time in your progress, also increase your inventory space, and so on and so on. But none of those things are super crucial and they're not going to impact you too much. And on the other side, you can also always just convert in-game currency for the premium currency so you can buy those things without even spending any money. At the same time, Guild Wars 2 is pay to play. You have a free trial that is very long. I think it's basically infinite free trial. You can play the core game forever for free. But once you buy the game, you have access to everything. However, you still have those things that you gotta buy them with premium currency. But you can just convert it, right? That doesn't really scale too much. Once you get those things, they're there. You're done. Like, once you get your maximum bank tabs, maximum inventory tabs. That's it. You don't have to ever buy them again on that same character at least, which means that this isn't much of a scaling when you think about it. Also, the gizmos that you get them, you can just use them on any of your other characters from the same account, which means that this level of pay to win isn't really scaling that much. However, on the other hand, if we compare a game like Throne of Liberty, because we already know what it's all about, the scaling is nearly infinite, and every single expansion, they're gonna release new gear, new caps, new level of progression, which means that once again, you just have to go through that pain process over again. Like, you're gonna have to spend money if you wanna actually get there as quickly as some other people, because in the end of the day, this is what pay to win really means. Being able to get to some point faster than somebody else with the advantage of spending real money. This is what really is pay to win, because other than that, some people just say, hey, you can't really buy some items with real money that you cannot obtain in the game. Well, most games are like that. There's almost no game where you can buy something with real money that you cannot actually obtain from the game. The problem is, the person that spends real money will get those things in 1 or 2 days, where you, as a free-to-play player, will probably have to grind for months. So that is obviously a pretty bad thing. Of course, once again, we have to wait until the game comes out, and then we will know what this is all about. How much does the pay-to-win element scales in Chrono Odyssey? Now, the next aspect, I would say, is also very important. This really just shows whether the company is really invested into their product, and this would reflect the longevity of the game. And this would be reusing assets or repackaging them as more or new content, and also using reskinned models. So what does that mean? Basically, this is the case with Throne of Liberty once again. You have a lot of supposedly new content, being that dungeons or other specific types of events, where they just basically use the same map layout that was designed some time ago, and very likely a lot of the game is already being designed, at least the world design is done, and what they do is just really add boundaries or just some specific effects to it, and that's it. They just reuse that same area. So be that for a dungeon, they don't create a unique specific area just for the dungeon, which means it's just cheaper, right? What that's telling to you is that they're not willing to spend a lot of money to actually create more content for the game, very specific content for different scenarios, right? They're just reusing the same old stuff. This goes for reskinned models as well. Like when you're looking at some bosses, very often they're just reskinned. They just add a couple of elements to them because it's way easier to just add some visual stuff compared to creating a whole new model with its own animations. Mostly, I'm not really the type of person to talk about that, but any developer, any game developer, or like a person that actually creates models and their animations and all those things, they can tell you that it's a lot more than just the actual look of the model. And when they just change the outside, the shell of it, that means that, again, they're choosing the cheaper way, which means they don't really want to invest too much in their product. Now, all of that is really pointing to what they really want to do is just get the initial product out as fast as possible, get it done, and then just cash out. And then from that point onward, they automatically put it on life support, like not investing anymore into it, and just kind of like pushing as much as possible with the minimum investment possible. This is really saying that they're not planning on keeping this game on for a very long time. On the contrary, when you look at games like World of Warcraft, Guild Wars 2, I'd say probably Final Fantasy 14, which I haven't played, but I'm assuming that they're on the same track. A lot of these games have one thing in common. They're most likely going to last more than a decade. And this is because they don't have those practices. They actually invest in their games and they want to make unique content. They don't want to just reuse stuff. Of course, they also do it, but at a much lower extent compared to a lot of these new games that pretty much they look amazing on the outside, but they just last for 1 or 2 years at best. And if they don't completely shut down, then they most likely lose over 90% of their player base, which is pretty bad. And none of these top MMO games that have been on for over a decade have ever had this situation where they would lose 90% of their player base, because this is pretty much the end of the game, even if they just keep it running on life support. And another thing that's kind of related to this is the death of the old content. Basically, a lot of these games have this thing in common where very quickly they're kind of like destroying it on their own, which is pretty bad. Instead of actually trying to keep their old content, so that could also keep players interested for a bit longer time, is that they design their games in such a way that people would just want to rush through the initial part of the game and then they would never want to go back, which means effectively you're destroying your old content because, again, Throne of Liberty is a good example. You have a huge world that is actually very beautiful, it's very good, very good graphics, and all that. However, once you get to the end game, you're most likely never going to get to these lower areas except for some specific event or some boss, and that's about it. But you do have a lot of sections of the world that are not going to be used anymore, even things like abyssal dungeons, for instance. This is the case with many games, I'd say most games, but the modern games are even worse with that because combined with the gradual decline of player base, you've seen less and less new players going in. So once you start the game, let's say after 1 year, you're most likely going to be all alone in your journey all the way to max level when you're going to find some people, but this is really just a bad sign. A game like Guild Wars 2 does a much better job with this when you have level scaling, so pretty much you can do whatever you want at any level you want, as long as you are high level enough. Anyway, you can always go back to lower levels and you just scale down, and you're not going to be overpowering the area, but it's also going to stay relative and you're going to obtain things that are also useful for you, which is a very good thing. Of course, classical games like World of Warcraft also have old content somewhat dead, because once you get to higher levels, you're probably never going to go to those lower level areas. But that's the other thing with very popular games, you always have new players coming in, which means you're always going to find players to play with, even at lower level areas. So that is another sign. And all of those things that I just told you about, potentially this new game, Chrono Odyssey, that is coming out, all of that is gonna help you with this new game that we don't know when it's coming out. It's probably gonna be soon. People are talking about it more and more. But yeah, Chrono Odyssey is coming soon. And you can use those advices that I'm telling you. Trust me, I have tested this so many times and I'm seeing it all the time. Just try it out. Look for those signs. It's really not too difficult. You're just gonna spend your first couple of days not getting super hooked into the game, but actually keep your eyes open for those little things. And if you spot them, then I can guarantee you that this is gonna be a bad game if it has those issues right in the beginning. I know there are a lot of Andes out there that really want this next big MMO to be good, and this is kind of like the issue, is that MMO players are desperate for a good game, and this is why publishers and developers are just kind of doubling down on this aspect of people being desperate, and they just use this emotion in their advantage of just doing whatever the fuck they want and releasing either unfinished products or very bad products as well with aggressive pay-to-win elements. And because people are just desperate for a good game, they just force it, right? They just force themselves to like something that is not really likable. A lot of people will not agree with me. I'm okay with this, but I'm right. That's it. Like, I don't care. This is how it is. That's the way it is. If the only thing that the game can offer is just high graphics, that's a bad game. And most of the good games, if you just look at this, that's a very interesting correlation between those facts, is that the good games very often don't have the best graphics. They have some unique style with their graphics, like World of Warcraft has this cartoonish look. Guild Wars 2 is somewhere like average graphics. It's not high-end game. Of course, yeah, it is old game. The good games are older games, obviously, but they never really pushed for graphics in the first place. Like, they just wanted to make something unique, but it didn't necessarily have to be the top graphics. So things like Unreal Engine 5, to me, it sounds like, hey, let's just make a game on a conveyor line, right? Because this engine provides us with a lot of tools to just streamline the process and make it so easy to actually design the game, because, well, we really don't want to design the game. What we really want is some generic world with generic models so we can slap on that game and cash it out. That's it. Because these engines make it so much easier. So obviously, a much more professional approach, a much better game would be the one that has its own unique engine that was designed in-house by the studio itself. Its unique engine just for their own game. I can guarantee you most of the time, if the studio creates their own engine, that means this game is actually gonna be good. That's a very good indication. The more you see, the more signs you see that the studio, the developer, is trying to save money on creating the product, it's already a bad sign. Don't get me wrong, in general that's just a business, and obviously you wanna lower down the cost of the production of something. However, there should be some line that beyond that, once you cross that line, that means you really just want to invest the very minimum into this, just drop it out there and make people buy this thing, even though it's not the best you can do. That's the problem. If you look at some big studio that has the resource, they're making below average products, that's a bad sign. If that was an indie studio, like with any of the future games, I would accept that, right? They make a mediocre product because obviously they just don't have the resource to make something top notch. But that's just fine because they at least create something genuine and actually good to the extent of their power. But when you look at big companies that just make those flashy games that look amazing on the outside and you say, hey, that's gonna be the next big thing. But then you just go in and waste a couple of days or a week before you realize that it's a bad game. Or there are very often those cases where, once again, those kind of like fanatic people that really force themselves to like something because they're desperate. But trust me, don't get attached to a fucking video game. If it's bad, it's bad. Just take the loss. That's it. It's better to waste 100 hours than waste 1000 hours, okay? Even if that's the case. But honestly, I'm gonna make this one of my missions in my life to try to save you time that you would otherwise waste in some video games, hoping that they're good. And I'm gonna try to expose those games as quickly as possible right in the beginning so that you know that the game is bad and you don't have to waste your time. You don't have to spend 100 hours or 500 hours to find out if the game is good. Yes, I did spend over 1000 hours in Throne of Liberty because I actually had fun and it wasn't that bad to some extent. But then more and more of what I was thinking from the beginning continued to happen and I just realized, yes, I was right in the beginning. I should have just left the game right away. But anyway, that's gonna be for this video, guys. I hope that this information was useful for you. You can test it out in the future and maybe possibly help you save you some time. And once again, I just use Chrono Odyssey as an example. I'm not saying that it's going to be bad or good. We don't have enough information for that. We're going to have to wait until the game is actually released and we can try it for ourselves because we're always going to have very filtered content, even if you watch videos about the game. But once you try it yourself, you will know if it's good or bad. So this is the end of this video. I'm also trying to reach my first 1000 subscribers and it will be amazing if you hit the subscribe and notification button so you don't miss out my latest videos. And I will continue to deliver to you the most valuable information I can. Thank you for watching and see you next time.